Nobody in that building saw it coming. Not the producers, not the audience, not the family standing on that stage. And what happened in the next 4 minutes changed all of them. The evening of February 7th had begun with the particular organized momentum of a live television production running on schedule. The Tran family from Garden Grove, California, had arrived early, 40 minutes before call time, because the family matriarch, Lily Tran, who was 69 years old and had been in this country for 31 years and had a relationship with punctuality that bordered on theological, had informed her family 3 weeks prior that they would not be the people who were late. They were not the people who were late. They stood in the holding area in their coordinating outfits, burgundy, her youngest son Kevin's suggestion, unanimously approved, with the contained, focused energy of people who have prepared for something and are now simply waiting for it to begin. The competing family, the Ogundimu family from Houston, had arrived 7 minutes after the Trans and had immediately begun filling the holding area with the specific warm noise of a large family that has never in its collective history experienced an awkward silence. There were 5 of them, a father named Solomon, his wife Grace, their 2 adult daughters, and Solomon's younger brother Felix, who had been included at the last minute when an original team member had a scheduling conflict, and who had spent the drive from Houston in the back seat reviewing statistics about the show that he had printed from the internet, which the rest of the family had found both endearing and slightly alarming. Everything had run on schedule. The families had been through makeup. The warm-up producer had worked the audience with the practiced ease of 9 years, and had left them at the precise temperature the show requires. Warm, but not overwrought. Engaged, but not exhausted. The lights had done what the lights do. Steve Harvey had stood in the wings in the 30 seconds before his entrance and done what he always does in those 30 seconds, which is private and has never been described publicly, and which is his. The Tran family's story had been in the pre-show briefing documents. The segment producer had flagged it with a single asterisk, which in the production shorthand of this show meant, handle with care and with full attention. Steve had read it twice on the drive-in, in the back of Philip's car, in the particular silence Philip maintained when Steve was reading something that required silence. Lily Tran had come to the United States from Vietnam in 1993, at 38 years old, with her 2 sons, Kevin, then 9, and Daniel, then 6, following her husband, Min, who had preceded them by 14 months and who had been working 2 jobs in Garden Grove while he waited for the paperwork that would allow his family to cross the distance between where they were and where he was. The reunion at LAX had lasted, by Kevin's memory, approximately forever. His father had not been able to speak for several minutes. His mother had not tried. Min Tran had worked. This was the central, structuring fact of the next 3 decades. He had worked with a consistency and a volume that had made him, in the small community of Garden Grove that knew him, a kind of quiet legend. He had worked the 2 jobs, and then a 3rd on weekends. He had learned English with the fierce application of a man who understood that language was the border between where he was and where he was trying to get. He had bought the house, not quickly, not easily, over 11 years of saving in the specific, systematic way of a man with a clear destination and an exact accounting of the distance to it. He had seen Kevin through college and Daniel through college, and had stood at both graduations with the expression of a man receiving something he had been working toward for so long that receiving it required a moment of recalibration, the adjustment between striving and having arrived. He had died 14 months before the taping. Stroke. He was 71 years old and had been in good health by every outward measure, which is the specific cruelty of certain strokes. They arrive without the warning that would allow preparation, and without the duration that allows goodbye. He had been here, and then he was not. And Lily had been in the kitchen when it happened, close enough to hear, and had found him, and that was the last image she had of the man she had crossed an ocean for. And it was an image she managed, daily, through a combination of faith and the specific discipline of a woman who has learned that some things you must simply not follow all the way down. She had been managing. This was the word her sons used when they spoke to each other about her. Managing. It was accurate and insufficient simultaneously. She was managing the grief and the house and the finances, which had shifted in ways that were not catastrophic but were real. Min's pension, his social security, the arithmetic of two people becoming one person, which always costs more than the arithmetic suggests it should. She was managing the specific loneliness of a woman who has shared every meal with someone for 44 years, and now sits at a table that has a chair she doesn't move, and a side that stays set, and a particular quality of quiet in the evenings that is different from the quiet she had known before. Denser, more present, the silence of someone's absence rather than the silence of a room. She had not told Kevin and Daniel the full shape of it. She told them she was fine. She told them she was keeping busy. She told them about the garden, which was true. She had expanded it since Min died, methodically, row by row, the way she approached anything that needed doing, and the garden was now twice the size it had been, and produced more than she could use. So she brought the surplus to the church on Fridays for the community meal, which gave her Fridays a purpose, and gave the church good tomatoes, and gave Min's garden, which is how she thought of it, an ongoing usefulness that felt like a conversation she was still having with him. She had not told them that some evenings she sat in his chair. She had not told them that she still made 2 cups of tea at night, his with 2 sugars, hers without, and that she drank hers and poured his out, and that this was not something she planned to stop. These were the true things she kept to herself, not because she was protecting her sons from grief. They were grieving too, she knew that, but because some part of grief belongs only to the person who is living inside it, and sharing everything is not intimacy, it is dissolution. And Lily Tran had never dissolved into anything. The application had been Daniel's. He had submitted it 5 weeks after Min died, sitting in his car in the parking lot of his office building in Irvine at 11:30 at night, because his mother had said once, years ago, not recently, years ago, when they used to watch the show together on Sunday evenings, all 4 of them, the years when all 4 of them still existed in the same present tense. She had said once that she thought she would be good at it. He had sat in the parking lot and remembered her saying that, and had submitted the application before he could think about it long enough to stop. He had not told Kevin he was doing it. Kevin had found out when the callback came, and had called Daniel and said, through an emotion he was not entirely in control of, that it was the best idea Daniel had ever had. Daniel had agreed. This was unusual because they disagreed about most things and always had, in the way of brothers who love each other completely and are also fundamentally different people, and the agreement had meant something to both of them that they did not say out loud. They had not told their mother that Daniel had written, in the additional context field of the application, a paragraph about Min, about the 14 months of waiting, about the 2 jobs and the 3rd job on weekends, about the graduations and the expression on his face at the graduations, about the chair that didn't get moved and the 2 cups of tea. Lily Tran walked onto that stage not knowing that the production team knew any of this. She walked on, thinking she was there to do something her family had organized for her enjoyment and her distraction. And she intended to do it well, because doing things well was not a mode she switched on for occasions. It was simply how she operated, continuously, the setting she had been born with, or had acquired so early, it made no difference. She was good at the game, immediately and obviously good. The particular kind of good that comes from a mind that categorizes and retrieves information with precision, that has been making calculations in multiple languages for 31 years, and has developed in doing so a cognitive flexibility that manifests, in this context, as an almost startling speed at reading what a question is actually asking beneath what it appears to be asking. She buzzed in on the second question before the other family had fully registered that the round had begun. The answer she gave was correct. She looked at the board when the number appeared with the brief, evaluating nod of a woman confirming a preliminary finding. Kevin, beside her, made a sound that was half laugh and half something else entirely. Steve Harvey had been watching her since the moment she walked out. He had the briefing document in his memory, and he was watching the person in front of him, and he was reading the distance between the two. And what he was reading was a woman who was entirely present and entirely contained, and who was carrying, inside that containment, something very large and very carefully held. Midway through the second round, in the pause between questions, Steve walked toward the Tran family. He had his microphone. He was not moving with the loose, performative ease of the standard inter-segment cross. He was moving with purpose, a different quality of movement, one that the audience, without being able to articulate why, registered and responded to by going quiet before he had said anything. He stood in front of Lily. He looked at her for a moment. He said, "Can I ask you something that's not about the game?" She said yes. She said it the way she said things, simply, without preamble. He said, "Tell me about Min." The studio fell completely silent. Not the anticipatory quiet of an audience waiting for a punchline. The silence of 300 people understanding simultaneously that they have just watched a door open. Lily Tran looked at Steve Harvey. She looked at him with the evaluating precision she brought to everything, reading the question behind the question, reading whether the room was trustworthy, and she found, in his face, what she was looking for. She told him. She told him about the 14 months. She told him about LAX, and the reunion that lasted approximately forever, and she smiled when she said it. Not a performed smile, the real one. The smile of a woman accessing a memory that is still warm despite everything that has come after it. She told him about the 2 jobs, and the 3rd, and the house, and the graduations. She told him about the garden, and the surplus, and the tomatoes at the church on Fridays. She did not tell him about the chair or the 2 cups of tea. Those she kept, as she had always kept them, for the part of grief that belongs only to the person living inside it. She talked for 8 minutes. The audience did not move. Solomon Ogundimu, across the stage, had one hand over his heart, and had placed it there so gradually and unconsciously that he did not notice it was there until his daughter touched his arm. Felix, the brother who had printed statistics from the internet, had folded the papers and put them in his pocket in the first minute and had not thought about them since. When Lily finished, Kevin reached over and put his hand on her shoulder. He did not say anything. Daniel, on her other side, was looking at the floor with the expression of a man who submitted an application in a parking lot at 11:30 at night and is now standing in the moment that application was always moving toward. The studio fell completely silent again while Steve Harvey stood in front of this family and did not immediately speak. Then he turned away from the podium. He walked 4 steps toward the center of the stage. He lifted the microphone. What the producers would later describe, in the documentary, in the interviews, in the behind-the-scenes footage that accumulated a viewing audience of its own, was that in this moment Steve Harvey's producer said into his earpiece that the next segment needed to begin. And Steve Harvey reached up and removed the earpiece. Calmly, without drama, with the simple deliberateness of a man who has decided something. He held it in his hand. He looked at it for a moment. He put it in his jacket pocket. Then he raised the microphone. "I'm going to say something," he said, to the room, to the cameras, to the 300 people and the viewing audience that would eventually number in the tens of millions. "And nobody is going to stop me because I already have the mic." A sound moved through the audience. Laughter and relief together. The release of breath from people who have been holding it. But what he said next was not a joke. He said, "I want to talk to everyone watching at home." He walked slowly as he spoke, not pacing, moving the way a person moves when the words are ahead of them and they are following. There is a Min in your life. Maybe he's gone. Maybe she's gone. Maybe they are still here, and you have not said the thing you are waiting for the right moment to say. I am telling you right now that this woman crossed an ocean. She waited 14 months. She made 2 jobs into 3. She bought a house. She stood at 2 graduations. And she is standing here tonight because her son remembered one sentence she said years ago on a Sunday watching this show. He stopped walking. He looked at the camera. One sentence from years ago, he said, that her son remembered, because he was paying attention. The studio fell completely silent in the way it falls silent when something has been said that is going to stay in the room long after the room empties. A camera operator near the back had set her camera on its mount and was standing with both arms folded across her chest and her chin down, watching. But Steve wasn't done. He turned back to Lily. He said, "Mrs. Tran, I want to ask you something else. The 2 cups of tea." Lily went very still. He said, "Daniel told us. He wrote it down." She looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at the floor. Kevin looked at Daniel. The particular triangulation of a family realigning around a revealed truth. Lily Tran looked back at Steve. She was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, in the same plain, precise voice she brought to everything, "It keeps him in the kitchen with me." The studio fell completely silent for the 3rd time, and this time the silence had a texture, thick and warm, and full of the specific weight of everyone in the room thinking, at the same moment, about the person they keep in the room with them. Steve Harvey pressed his free hand against his eyes for a moment, just a moment. Then he lowered it. "I'm not done," he said, which was not his usual formulation, which was just the truth. He had made the calls during the production break before the bonus round. The first was to a Vietnamese-American community organization in Garden Grove that ran a widows' support group. Specifically, the particular kind of support group that Lily had not been told about and would not have sought out because seeking out support was not her mode, but which, the organization's director had told Steve, operated on the understanding that some people have to be brought to the room rather than finding it themselves. A seat was being held. The second call was to a horticultural nonprofit in Orange County that partnered community gardeners with school programs, placing surplus produce and the people who grew it into elementary school garden education initiatives. Lily's garden, Min's garden, would have a school attached to it by spring. 23 third graders would learn to grow tomatoes from a 69-year-old woman who had been growing them for Min, and who would now, additionally, grow them for children who had never seen anything become something from a seed. The Ogundimu family had not been asked, and had not waited to be asked. Solomon had spoken to Grace quietly during the break. Grace had spoken to their daughters. Felix, who had come at the last minute with his printed statistics and his earnest preparation, had suggested the specific thing, which was this. Before the bonus round, Solomon Ogundimu walked across the stage to the Tran family podium and stood in front of Lily and said, in a voice that was steady and full, "My mother came here from Lagos in 1981. She worked 3 jobs. She is 81 years old, and she still makes my father's chair face the window because he liked the light." He stopped. "Your husband built something," he said. "We can see it standing right here." He gestured with one hand at Kevin and Daniel, at Lily herself, at the whole of what Min Tran had made possible, and what was standing on a game show stage in matching burgundy, because a woman who crossed an ocean had said once, years ago, on a Sunday evening, that she thought she would be good at it. The audience was on its feet. The Ogundimu daughters were holding each other. Felix had the statistics in his pocket, and his eyes were closed. Grace Ogundimu was looking at Lily Tran with the expression of a woman who has just been given a sentence she intends to keep. 3 months after the taping, the clip of Steve Harvey removing his earpiece had been viewed 74 million times. The clip of Lily saying it keeps him in the kitchen with me had been viewed separately and had accumulated 91 million views. The 2 clips traveling together and separately across every platform, in 12 languages, in text messages between adult children and their parents, and between people who had lost someone, and between people who were afraid of losing someone, and between people who simply recognized, in 8 words, the specific grammar of devoted love. The Widows Support Group in Garden Grove had a 3-month wait list by April. The organization's director said she had never seen anything like it in 22 years of running the program. A surge of women, most of them older, most of them from immigrant communities, most of them having managed alone for months or years, calling and showing up and saying some version of the same thing. "I saw the woman on the show. I think I need this." A year later, Lily Tran was in her garden on a Wednesday morning in March, when the first group of 3rd graders arrived. 23 children in a line, in the particular slightly chaotic order that children maintain in lines, with a teacher at the back and an aide at the front, and the whole procession making the specific noise of children who are outside and interested. Lily had prepared. She had set out small gardening gloves in a range of sizes. She had organized the seed packets by type. She had, because it was her nature, done a practice run the evening before, walking through what she intended to show them, talking to the garden the way she sometimes talked to the garden, which Min would have found either eccentric or completely reasonable, depending on his mood. She showed them how to prepare the soil. She showed them the depth of the hole for each seed. She told them, in her precise and patient way, that a seed doesn't know it's going to become a tomato. It just does what it's made to do, if you give it what it needs. One child, a small girl with her hair in a single braid, asked if the seeds were afraid of the dark. Lily considered this seriously. She said she didn't think so. She said she thought they were just waiting. Daniel was there with a camera. He took photographs. He sent them to Kevin. Kevin sent them to nobody because there was nobody to send them to who would understand what they meant, except Daniel, who had already taken them. He called his mother that evening. He told her the photographs were beautiful. She said the children were very loud. He said that was good. She agreed, after a moment, that it was. Today, the chair in Lily's kitchen still faces the direction it has always faced. The 2 cups of tea are still made every evening, his with 2 sugars, hers without. These practices have not changed. They will not change. They are not symptoms of an inability to move forward. They are a forward of a particular kind that looks like stillness from the outside and is in fact the most active possible engagement with a life that still contains everything it always contained, plus the shape of what is missing, which takes up as much space as the person did, and requires, daily, the same attention and the same care and the same deliberate, chosen presence. On the Friday after the school visit, Lily brought tomatoes to the church. More than usual, the garden had been productive, the early spring warm and cooperative. The woman who received them at the kitchen door had been receiving them for 2 years, and knew Lily, and knew, broadly, the story. She looked at the tomatoes and then at Lily and said, "Min's garden did well this week." Lily said, "It always does. The things we keep alive outlive us if we tend them. The garden, the chair, the 2 cups of tea, the one sentence said on a Sunday evening that a son remembered in a parking lot 11 months after his father died, and acted on before he could stop himself. These are not small things dressed up as large ones. They are the actual substance of a life. The love is in the tending. The legacy is in what keeps growing after the hands that planted it are still. If Lily's story stayed with you, share it with someone who is keeping someone in the kitchen with them. And subscribe, because every week there is another room where love shows up in a form nobody expected and changes everything it touches.